this is Trish, and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we have a very special guest named Matt, and we are going to talk about the hotly debated topic of equity-based grading and why it is not as great as some people might think. And our guest today, Matt, feels so strongly about this issue that he has sued his school district. And I know that I cannot wait to hear this story. But before we get started, Matt, I would love to know what got you interested in becoming a teacher.
When I'm a musician, so I was doing a gig. I've always been good at math. My dad is a math teacher, so I got inspiration from him. But I got called to do a show. It was at a college, and the guy that called me, he played trumpet, and he got on the phone and he started tutoring a student because he owned a tutoring company, and he was doing math. And I was like, oh, I could do some math. I like math. Something I was good at in school. My dad's a math teacher. So then he was like, oh, I own a company. You can come out and do some tutoring. So I went down to Dallas, where they were doing tutoring for school districts that, were close to failing, about to be taken over by the state. And then I found an appreciation for seeing students have that light bulb turn on when they actually understood the concepts and everything else. And I saw how the teachers were stressed out. I wasn't stressed out like that because I was just a tutor and I was just in for, doing pullouts and stuff like that. But I got a passion for it there.
Awesome. And I would love to know, what were the first few years of your teaching experience like? Did you enjoy it? Were you highly rated? How did all that work out?
My first few years of teaching, I went and taught at the same school my dad did. So I was working with him, teaching math. He was teaching math also. So I was shielded from a lot of the things that normally would have happened if he weren't there, because he was a seasoned teacher, had been teaching in the district for years. But I did have issues with administrators wanting certain grades and certain outcomes for certain students. And it didn't make sense to me because I was like, okay, so I have so many students that aren't doing anything in the classroom, and you want a certain percentage to be passing because they were like, well, you have to have a certain percentage to be passing, and if they're not passing, that's probably something that you're doing. And it didn't make sense because I'm like, all the students that do what they're supposed to do or even engage with the material, they're all passing. They're doing well. They're doing what they are supposed to do. And the others, I'm like, mathematically, it doesn't make sense. So the outcome would be when all students decide to do nothing, then how are we going to keep these percentages the where you guys want them? It didn't make sense. And I saw that that's where we were going. And that was back in 2012, 2011, 2012, 2013 school years.
Definitely. And I guess this is a great time to just bring up the whole topic of grading for equity. And I just want to read to the audience some of the typical policies that go along with this, although this is not true for every school. So, in places like California, in certain regions, they want 21% to count as passing. An A starts at 80% or lower, C starts at 41%. 50% is the minimum grade on all assignments. There's no zeros allowed, even for missing work. There's no late work penalties. There's unlimited test retakes and redos. Homework doesn't count toward the grade. Participation can't be graded. Effort and behavior excluded from grades. And the final grade tends to reflect only the most recent grade. So that basically means old grades are dropped where, just if you made 4 zeros and get a 90 miraculously at the end, all those zeros are deleted. And there's just so many things. Attendance can't be factored into academic grades or anything at all. And so I could just go on, but I'm curious, how many of those types of policies did you see where you were working?
I We're not like California where we have, an A is an 80, but we do have no zeros. Minimum grade is a 50. Several retakes. Over the years, they changed the weight of our grade books. So now it's 40% is tests and 60% is everything else. So you just have tests and everything else. And it's only 40%. All students have the ability to retake those tests. So when students complain, they can retake them even more than that. We do have some discretion because our policies don't specifically say that they get unlimited, but administrators will treat it as unlimited and hound you. I think that's about it. There's a lot more though too. You said a lot.
Yeah. What? I totally understand. I kind of had a similar situation, but actually, I think it was worse than all of this because in most of the schools that I taught at, regular grades didn't exist at all. So we could assign homework, projects, group work, quizzes. Nothing made it into the grade book except for so called benchmark assignments or assessments. And they would call it sometimes like standards based grading or different things. They didn't call it necessarily equitable grading, but it was kind of the same idea because these little benchmark tests were the only thing that counted for so-called grades, but even then it wasn't graded. Traditionally they might get like an M for meets expectations, and that might be like 80 or higher. Maybe from like a 50 through a 70, that might be like a W working towards. And then maybe depending on the school, they might have like a letter like an N, it needs improvement for 50 and below or something like that. And so parents would just see these kind of weird letters on the progress reports, and really nobody could get held back for anything. And it took like an act of Congress to actually try and get a student held back. And essentially, it was all on the teacher. You had to almost make like a court case for why a kid didn't pass. And then the teacher was in trouble, and you just got peppered with questions like, well, what are you doing to make this student pass? Like, justify your grades. What interventions did you try? And essentially, teachers knew that all of the blame and the focus was on them if a student didn't pass. So then that put pressure on teachers to kind of fudge grades, to keep things moving, and to not ever really mention that a kid should be held back. And so these kind of weird policies are happening all over the country. And a lot of people are saying that this is about equity or serving Black kids. Did you hear any of that kind of language in your school?
Yes. They called it students being successful. How are you helping students be successful? So we went into a whole, this whole suit that I'm going through is all tied into these ideas of I teach at a district that is almost 80% Black. But it's not just the students, it's also in a Black community. So you have the staff is predominantly Black, the administration is predominantly Black, the school board is 100% Black.
Hmm.
So it's a different dynamic because I'm looking at it as okay, we need to hold our students to excellence. And having these types of policies is saying that they're incapable of meeting the standards. And it's not just grades, it could be behaviorally what we're doing in that department and everything else. They're incapable. So we're going to lower the bar so they don't get the underlying skills that they're supposed to have. And then you have situations where the students are not going to be able to succeed in any endeavor that they go into after. I teach high school. So after high school, um, and so I would have meetings with principals. I don't know if we're going to get into the timeline of all those different things, but that definitely is a conversation that came up numerous times over a lot of different aspects of teaching.
Definitely. And you can feel free to kind of jump in wherever you want to with the timeline. You can kind of tell us maybe if there were some certain events that kind of got the ball rolling with you realizing, like, oh no, this is going to be a problem. Just wherever you want to start, you could tell us the story.
It started back in 2022, 2023. So we had no teachers. I was the only Algebra 2 teacher in the whole campus. So they didn't have any instruction going on at all. There were four sections, so one out of four had a teacher. All the other classes had a permanent sub. So they threw everyone in the community room. So it's a big room, sort of like a college classroom. There were 100 students in there. So it was me teaching and doing everything else. And you sort of had the subs in there trying to monitor the kids the best they can. So I quickly saw that it was going to become just a hangout, but it's algebra, it's algebra too. So they need this course. They're going to need this understanding and these skill sets. And I have the honors kids in there. I have the regular kids in there. I have all the kids in the whole district. There's only one high school in our district. So any kid that's in algebra 2 is sitting in my classroom in this community room. And of course, majority Black, because that's the district. So I'm like, we have to do something. We can't let this core class turn into a hangout. So the only way that I could really teach was to make sure I was enforcing everything that I was doing in my classroom, because I've always been sort of a disciplinarian. My dad is, they were military, both my parents. And I see the benefit of having discipline as a foundation to engage in learning. We call it buy-in in education, but no one ever frames it that way. Discipline is a buy-in. that a cost that students have to pay to be admitted into the educational process. So I made sure I was enforcing the laws and policies that we have on our books. They have dress code. They had ID. Students were supposed to wear their IDs above their waist. We have an attendance policy where the students are supposed to be in the classroom at a certain time. So I was enforcing all those things to make sure that we're getting the students in the class. I instituted a seating chart in that big old community room so we could easily take attendance, because we would have students that I didn't know all the students. So you just have kids just coming in that weren't even supposed to be in there. So I had to find quick ways to identify all the students and hold the students accountable for their part, to not just try to take advantage of the situation. So as time progressed, a substitute, were having issues with disrespect. They were writing referrals. I was contacting parents for most of those referrals. So when the substitute turned her referrals in, the principal was like, well, you guys need to contact all these parents. We're not going to process any of these referrals. And they sent them back to the sub, and the sub's like, I don't know what to do. The kids are being disrespectful. They're not listening to me. They're not doing what they're asked to do. I'm like, okay. I took the referrals back to that principal, and I'm like, hey, I'm the only teacher in there. We're in a community room. The whole district students are sitting in here. I need you to do something about this. So she's like, I don't know what I can do. So she took it to a higher administrator, and the administrator told her, no, no, you need to go ahead and process these referrals and, do your part, do your job. This was this principal's first year. She wasn't my direct administrator. The students had administrators over the specific grades, but the next year she became my administrator over early college, where I moved over there. So the next year, I was doing the same thing, enforcing dress code and policies and stuff like that. And I started getting called to the office. And she would be like, okay, well, you got too many kids failing, and too many kids are not being successful in your class, and all that type of stuff. And I laid out, okay, hey, I'm having students that are cheating on certain assignments, and I'm flagging them for cheating. I've been contacting their parents and doing X, Y, and Z. I'm making sure that they're in dress code. I'm making sure that they come to class on time, so they have expectations to strive for and everything else. So that's sort of those type of things, those back and forth, started putting me on the hot seat. So then she actually wrote me up for not submitting lesson plans the way that she wanted them submitted. I was actually one of the few teachers in our campus that was actually turning in lesson plans at all. And then I had to let them know, I'm like, okay, I see that there's an issue with these lesson plans. Our lesson plan policy violates state law. There's supposed to be a brief overview of, a weekly or unit lesson. The administration, they wanted a slide deck for every day, a daily, each slide, each lesson would be, 14 slides. And then I had two preps. I was teaching Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. And they told us these would be done in PLCs. They were so long, they were never completed in PLC. So most teachers didn't turn in anything. So she wrote me up for not following that format or adding all the detail after I told her, yeah, our lesson plan policy violates the law. Most teachers aren't even turning them in anyway. Y'all told us that we were supposed to be doing these in PLCs. So that was just an excuse to write me up. So after she wrote me up later on, they eventually just ripped me from my algebra classes. We had a meeting about calculators, and they were always wondering, why aren't you just teaching them the calculator? Teach them the calculator, because I do Algebra 1 star, and they wanted them to use the calculators on the star, and the students had no understanding of how to actually manipulate equations, how to do the processes legitimately, because in eighth grade, all they did was plug stuff into the calculator. The calculator gives the answer. I had always been opposed to that logic, because the students come in and they don't know the difference between a calculator, a solver, and now AI. And it's like, oh, if I just plug something in and it gives me something out, I use the calculator. That's what a calculator does. So it just was encouraging cheating, and they were cheating themselves out of an education. So I was trying to rein that in, so that the students can actually get the education they're working every day to get. So they pulled me out. They put the instructional coach in. So they said, "Oh, you're not teaching anymore. The instructional coach is going to teach." About 2 weeks after that, then there was a TINA plan that they tried to put me on, teacher needs improvement plan, with a bunch of domains. And I'm like, oh, these domains are not what I do at all. So I filed a grievance. The next day after the grievance was filed, they pulled the instructional coach back and said, go ahead and back and teach your classes. I had a meeting with that administrator and the head administrator about the teacher needs improvement plan to discuss the domains that just popped up that didn't make any type of sense. And she wasn't able to explain it. The head administrator wasn't able to explain all those domains. So then he pulled the TINA plan away. He just discarded it. And then that year pretty much came to a close. So it was a lot of back and forth, and they tried to retaliate against me for just trying to hold our students to standards to benefit our kids. So the next year, that's a lot. I'm so sorry.
It's great.
The next year, I came back. I signed another contract. I'm like, okay, we still got work to do. Hopefully next year is better. Week 3, I had a lot of students that cheated on a test, and I gave, several of them zeros. I contacted parents about, students haven't been being honest or having integrity in their practice. There was a lot of AI usage. And I have documents, we do screen to scratch. So I have everything in a Google Classroom archived. So I have all the documents, I have their actual tests, and they do it on an online platform, which shows their timestamps. So we can see how long each question took them. And as the test progresses, the questions get more complicated, and they're not supposed to be using calculator. This test was a complete non-calculator test. So the timestamps didn't make sense. But administrators didn't ask me about that at all. They just said, okay, we're removing you from early college. There's been too many student complaints. And that's after I gave zeros for the students cheating. So they removed me. And then all the students in the school started getting very hostile towards me because they were like, well, he gave us zeros. Administration took all that out the grade book and put in 100s for all the students. So now we're in a situation where they're looking at me like I did something wrong, because why would the school district change the grades after this teacher said, oh, some students cheated, but now they're giving everybody 100. So this teacher has definitely gone rogue. And there was a bunch of flack and just complaining and complaints, and students as being belligerent, and then a whole bunch of students schedule change after I was moved out of the early college campus over onto another campus, the regular high school campus. They were changing students. If students complained, they'll just pull them right out of my class. Any student that would complain, they'll just put them into, and again, we had a lot of subs. They'll just put them in the class with the subs. And then another principal came up to me and was like, well, I know you're just getting to this class. It was like the 3rd or 4th week of the school year this year. And it was like, I know you just got over here, but these students had a sub. So, all the students, they need to get at least a 70. So there were pretty much any student that had a sub, which most of our teachers are subs, they couldn't fail. It doesn't matter if they go to class, if they turn in any work. They just said, if you have a sub, you're not going to fail. I guess they didn't want to raise eyebrows because they don't have the staffing or whatever else. I'm not exactly sure, but all these things violate state law. The minimum grade being a 50. Students are complaining about that because I didn't necessarily do that. We have it in our grading policy. It's suggested as a best practice. But they say, oh, we don't actually have that policy because it's just stated as a best practice to not give 50s and no zeros. But if a teacher is getting backlash because they are not giving minimum grades of a 50, and students have an expectation and parents have an expectation for a minimum grade of at least a 50 or something higher, then you are violating state law, especially in Texas, because Texas does not allow minimum grades. So the school district is doing things that the law does not promote. A lot of the equity initiatives, Texas law does not promote those, and actually has laws that discourage the things that they're doing. So they're operating in illegal grounds, just period.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, did parents and administrators come right out and say to you, as a Black man, you should know the plight of our Black children. Why are you doing this? Or was it more implied that because they're Black, you have to have lower standards?
It was more implied. They asked for leniency. I had conversations with parents, and some of them will say, oh, I came to you as a Black man. These are Black kids. At the other campus where I was reassigned, I continued to enforce dress code. I stopped doing zeros for academic dishonesty because they questioned my professional judgment. And I'm like, well, let me do something that's more, you don't have to be a professional to know that a student is out of dress code. You don't have to be a professional to know something simpler. So I'm going to enforce those things so it's not questionable. If you don't have to dissect all of my data and go through and make a professional judgment like I can. why are we just allowing students to be out of dress code? Why are we allowing students just to roam the hallways all day and not do anything about it? Why are we allowing students to just do what they want to do and not disciplining or doing anything? We're hurting our students. So I was enforcing the dress code. There's a student, because they're supposed to have, the khakis and the collar shirt and wear their ID on a lanyard. The kids come in with Crocs, sweats, no shirt, just like they woke up out of bed coming into the building. They're supposed to have been checked at the door with security, with the principals checking them. But for some reason, they're still in the classroom. Not first period, second period, third period, fourth period. They come to my classroom, fifth period. No one said anything to them all day. Um, and then I'm the one that's, okay, you're out of dress code. I'm gonna need you to go get it taken in. So parents were upset. It's like, you're the only teacher doing this. Why are you doing this? What do you have against these? These are black kids. What are you doing? And I'm like, so black kids can't meet expectations. They can't rise to the expectation that we have for them. And then of course, our district policies, if we go to the school board's policies, we have a dress code to instill discipline, responsibility, to foster respect for authority. That's the reason why we have these policies. And also security is in there also, but just it's a minimum ask. Come to school in dress code. You're going somewhere where you should learn. You have to put some effort into it so you appreciate it. It's called putting in a little bit of investment in so you appreciate the education that you're getting. Since we're not holding the kids to any standards, there's zero buy-in. I know we say buy-in is all about entertainment and making the kids feel good. And if there's something more entertaining happening in the hallways, that's on you. That's not even the intent. So the parents have said it. Administration has definitely hinted at it, but I don't think, yeah, it's not right. It's not right.
I totally agree. And it's just so weird to me because I kind of started in 2013 with Teach for America. And I feel like it was like the end of the old fashioned era, right? So they were big at that time on discipline, on having students speak proper English, on having them follow dress code, on publicly posting grades so that students had that buy in and that interest in competing and seeing how they were doing. I mean, the culture of education was so different in the early TFA era, and something between 2013 and 2025 radically changed to where now, standards are toxic, zeros are toxic. All of the talk about, the school to prison pipeline being a result of like zero tolerance policies. And I haven't really talked to anybody from places like Teach for America in like a decade, but I know that charter schools specifically were really, really big on almost having an elite private school atmosphere where the kids were disciplined. Some of them even went as far as having like silent hallways and silent lunch because everything was about school almost being sacred and kids being there to learn and them feeling invested in their learning. And I just don't know what happened. Like, did you see a change from when you graduated high school yourself to once you got in the classroom? And what are your thoughts on some of those things?
I did. I went to a magnet school in my elementary years, and all the students, they had to apply to go. So there was automatically a lot of investment on the parents' part. So the school was like, yeah, you gotta go. Like all that effort and energy that went into getting to the school would be wasted. So there was a sense of pride in, I got in, let me do the best I can. I want to make sure my parents look good, my family is represented well. I want to carry myself with some sense of dignity and integrity and, excellence. Nowadays, it's just more so there's nothing for the kids to strive to. Everything is given to them. Since they're entitled to everything, what do they need to put forward? So there's no effort given. And I'm seeing the higher students starting to fall down that pathway of just zero expectation, because if we're not enforcing anything, then I can just do pretty much anything and I'm gonna get a grade and I'm gonna do what I want to do while I'm here. I don't want to be here anyway. And most of life is doing what you don't want to do. It's supposed to be. But if you're not getting trained that, and it's like, well, if they don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. It's not beneficial for the student. So I think that's been the biggest thing that's been starting to deteriorate that sense of pride in doing your best and having excellence in schoolwork. I also noticed that administration, they're more willing to just build a name for themselves. And then they want to make sure that they fabricate the data to a certain extent, hopefully get some distinctions on the campus, and then hop to another school real quick before the actual effects of what they were doing happens to the school under their watch. So it's not their fault. It's like, oh, I'm such a great principal. I'm a great, superintendent. I did this with this district. So that's why they're usually in place for about 2 to 3 years as the shelf life for a principal. So they can do what they need to do, destroy the whole place, but optically make it look good, and then take those credentials somewhere else. Oh, I transformed this school. The data's all good. Meanwhile, all you were doing was fabricating grades, abusing teachers, compromising the students, and giving them whatever they wanted. And then you jump ship when the negative effects of what you've been doing for the past 2 or 3 years actually come into play, and all the harm that you caused with these terrible policies and ideologies. You're on and doing a book tour, or you're on going to another district to go talk and do all this other type of stuff. So I think it's a lot of financial gain on the back end that's caused the guards at the wall, the administrators, to be like, I can either make a bunch of money in this field on outside gigs, or I can have integrity and sort of be locked in to whatever pay I'm getting and let the results show. And then I'm going to have a bunch of flack from everybody else. Why are the results so bad? Because no one wants the results to really show of how bad the school districts are. What type of shape are these students really in? Everyone's trying to contain it. So it's like, well, everyone else is doing it. I'm just going to get mine and move around. So that's sort of the attitude. If we had people, teachers, administrators, superintendents with any type of integrity, they would be honest with the people in the communities and let everyone know what's really happening. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves and get to work. And this is not going to change over a day. We can have significant growth in a couple of days if we actually swap some policies around. But the behaviors of the students, they're so entitled, you're going to have to break that entitlement. And there's going to be an uproar, an uprising, because they're addicted to it.
You are 100% right. And you just described exactly what I saw in the 8 years I was in the classroom, especially with the administrators coming in for a few years, doing some crazy initiative and fleeing as soon as they could. And that is just the pattern that I saw over and over. And rumor has it, Joe Feldman, one of the people that is like the biggest proponents for equitable grading, he's literally made millions. And somebody was saying that even the little people that work for him and sit and observe a classroom for a day will get like $5,000 for that day to just sit there and kind of be on their phone. And so you're 100% right. There is such an incentive financially for these grifters to come in and destroy schools, and they're not in the classroom anymore. And so it's just so strange. And so I'm kind of curious, why do you think more parents and teachers are not seeing through this? Or do you think that they do see through it, but they don't think that the risk is worth it to really fight this?
They see it. Everyone sees it. I've seen it online. I see it in comment sections. When stuff is happening in the school, it's like, why are the schools so this way? And you hear the teachers. A lot of teachers have the same testimony that we have, and they've been saying the same things for years. But the question is, okay, if this is really happening, why is there no accountability? Why is there not another entity coming in and checking these administrators? And the checks and balances is off. So how the checks and balances work, and this is the reason why I'm suing, and I'm going to encourage all teachers to sue on their own. This is the reason. Is because school districts are local governments. They have governmental immunity. So there's a lot of things, and if you have a superintendent that's in the game, as same way as a principal is in the game, they are not checked by anyone except the school board, and the school board volunteers. They just sort of defer to the judgment of the administration. They are trained, and their legal counsel that informs the school board, that's probably running the school anyway, and the district anyway, they're informing them just to go whatever the administrators say. So the administrators are able to run rampant and do whatever they want to do. So no other government is going to come in and check a local government unless there is some type of legal proceedings. The Texas Education Agency, the TEA, they do some checks, but it has to be on certain levels before they actually really get involved to do investigations. They'll usually come in and talk to administrator, and they'll talk to the higher ups. But if they're all into the same game, you don't penetrate that shield of secrecy, and they're just going to blame it on a teacher. And they're going to try to document it on a teacher and be like, okay, this is the documentation. This other administrator corroborated it. So it's this teacher's fault. and it stays on the teacher's level unless we're able to penetrate through. So the reason why we have to go in and litigate on our own is because even lawyers are strapped. We have a lawyer shortage, just like how we have a teacher shortage, and they're going to pick and choose which cases they want to take. The damages in education lawsuits might be nothing unless there's some type of discrimination or retaliation tied to discrimination. Then they're not even going to touch the case. There's not even a legal case to take action and penetrate through the local government's immunity. So we have an issue in that regard. So for my campus, and what I'm doing is my whole thing was I was opposing discrimination. I was opposing the discrimination of lax enforcement of policies of the school district when administrators are not following the own dress code that they've put into place. And it's not benefiting our students. They're not learning the responsibility, respect for authority, and all those other things that the policies are in place for. That is a charge. I am now opposing your discriminatory actions to not, well, these kids, they can't do it. They're Black kids. We got to give them leniency. That's a form of discrimination, even if the students and the parents deem it as beneficial. That is discrimination. So when they started messing with me and changing things that happened to me because I was trying to enforce the policies and doing what I'm supposed to do as an educator, that is retaliation because I oppose the discrimination. Now I have a legal case. So it's not just, oh, they treated me so badly. It's I'm doing something that's affecting Black students and you're stopping me because you're trying to discriminate against them and I'm trying to prevent you from doing it. So once we do that, then we can proceed with a lawsuit inside of court, which will start getting administrators, superintendents, boards' attention about ignoring policies that we have on paper. A lot of the school districts, they have a lot of policies on paper that they're not applying that would definitely be beneficial. I noticed this during COVID when I started getting into AI and I was looking at all the foolishness happening in the school districts. Like the school district I was in, we were always on the news. Students were posting stuff, bunch of fights and everything else happening on campus. I'm like, why is this happening? And I was like, what if I were in charge and I had the final say, what would I do to fix the school district? And I made my list, and then I started digging into the school's policies, and there was nothing I would change. There really wasn't much I would change. I'm like, the people that wrote these policies knew what they were talking about. The issue is not the policies themselves. So going to, the state capitol and be like, we need new laws and all this other type of stuff. That's not going to change anything because our laws are actually fine. I know for Texas, our laws are fine. It's just the enforcement of those laws and how do we make sure that the administrators charged with enforcing and the superintendents that are charged with overseeing them enforcing it and the board that's in charge of overseeing the superintendents that's supposed to be in charge of overseeing the administrators, they are doing what they're supposed to do. So that accountability piece is not there. So the only thing left that we can do is start filing lawsuits for damages to our professional reputations for just the harm they're causing to students. Because my case has Title VII, has Title VI, it has Section 1983 claims of different types of discrimination against not just me, but the students as well as an advocate. So I think that's the way that we sort of penetrate through and start getting this together.
Beautifully said. And I just want to try to articulate for the audience what we're up against, because our argument is that having low standards for Black kids is actually what is racist. But the social justice machine is arguing that we are somehow helping Black kids by, never suspending them, not enforcing dress code, not having homework that's graded, not having them fail anything. And I just think the logic is so crazy. But how do you convince somebody like that your side is true social justice and their side is not only fake social justice, it's actually racist? How would you explain that to someone?
I don't think we can, to be honest. It's sort of, and it starts getting political at that point because certain political sides sort of lean to one side or another. I've never voted. I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't lean to either side. I'm on God's side, so I don't choose either one. But I would just have to say, to try to convince them is to get them into the school districts to see really what's going on, see the effects of the students themselves. A lot of people that say those things, they're usually tied to the government or the government systems or its benefits that come out. And they're like, well, we had enough black kids dying and getting shot and, Trayvon Martin and all, all these other type of situations that happen. Um, and they're so jaded, they believe that the policies themselves are racist. Well, I would have to say, if that's the case, for my school district, we have no excuse. Our student body is predominantly African American and almost 100% minority. Like it's 80, almost 76% African American. It's like 20 something Mexican, and everybody else is everything else. Like we're minority, and our administration 100% black, our school board 100% black. So if our policies are racist, then why haven't you guys changed it? You're a local government by yourself. You can change the policies to whatever you want them to be. You can change them to be, we're just going to go ahead and give kids free grades, and we're going to do this, that, whatever. Put it down in writing if that's what we want to do, and then everyone will see this is what we're doing. But right now, we're sort of in la la land where the policies on the book are something. What we're actually practicing is something else. So the community doesn't know what we're doing. So if something doesn't work, it's like, oh, we need to reform our policies. But those policies actually are good, but we're not doing any of it. So if something happens, they're like, oh, but we're doing all these things on this book. We're doing all these things that we have on the books, and things just aren't working. We're lying to the people, and so they can't see actually what's going on. So I would say just making sure that people can actually see what the actual effects of not disciplining kids, allowing kids to run rampant in the classroom after they've, you know, interrupted the lesson so many times. In Texas, we have a right to have that student removed and kicked out. I actually was in a school district before where I tried to do that, and I got the call in the principal's office like, we don't do that. I should have sued that school district. Now thinking about it, I'm much older. That was my fourth year of teaching. I definitely should have sued that school district when he told me, oh yeah, we don't do that. You can't have a student removed because you're violating my rights as a teacher, and you're jeopardizing all the other students in that classroom that that student is terrorizing while he's interrupting the lesson, and learning can't happen. So everyone's halted because one student doesn't want to do right. So I would just say, I know your question was about how do we convince the people. I don't know how we convince them, but I know we can create another option. It doesn't necessarily have to be in school suspension or expulsion per se, but getting them out of the general regular population of students and finding another track or just something else supplemental. We need to be specialized. We can't be everything. We can't be mom, we can't be dad, we can't be a pastor, a therapist, we can't do everything. So if we're going to try to do everything, we're going to do nothing well, and that's what's been causing our failure. So we need to know our place as educators and stay out of all the other domains and not absorb those other responsibilities. Be like, okay, this is not our job, we are not equipped, and we don't specialize in this. I'm going to go on a quick tangent. That's something else they've been pushing out again, like you said, with the social justice, where we're going to sit down and have these little meetings and try to bring them back in. And they said it comes about from the ancient civilizations, or I don't know, it's like a Native Americans, where they can sit down by the campfire and they dole out punishments. Yeah, but back then they actually had authority to execute people. So it's like, yeah, you're not doing it right, because that was a court case. So yeah, little Johnny's not doing right. So let's go ahead and put him down. Like that's the consequences in those contexts where we're sitting down by the campfire in a Native American situation. Yeah, you infringed on their rights. We're taking you out and your family. That's it. That's how they were operating back in the day. We don't have near that level of power nor the training of a counselor. And then I looked it up. I was like, okay, where's this social justice stuff coming from? I tried to look up the data. They're like, oh, the data shows this, data shows that. Even in counseling world, they don't have data that solidifies that it's helpful as counselors. So I guess the counselor pitched it to a principal, and it's like, oh, this sounds good. We're gonna roll it out. And there was another initiative that is like, oh, if I roll it out, then I can go around, tour around the country and bill other districts because they have to spend their professional development money anyway. I might as well take that state money for myself and have something to shop to the districts and make some money. And that's how it winds up on our laps. And it's like now we have times where we have to go and do training about this that we're still not going to be a professional counselor. And now we have to implement this crap in our classrooms. It makes zero sense. And I know I rambled on and I went down 10,000 different pathways, but it's all good.
It was great. I disagree so much with everything you're saying, and it makes me think of so many things because I'm in a counselor education program as we speak. And it's just so interesting. Even the chapter that I was reading this week, it's constantly talking about systemic racism and systems of oppression. And essentially, in school, we were taught that basically whiteness is the cause of Black students not succeeding. And you brought up such an excellent point. How does that still stand true when you're in a school district where basically everyone in charge is Black? That's such a great point, but there's always kind of an invisible boogeyman that can be pointed to. And since it's not tangible, it's never defeated. That, everything that's wrong can be offloaded to this amorphous, white man, that's causing our current problems. And I think the biggest problem is this kind of battle between systems versus individual accountability and choices. And like you said, it's so often framed as if it's a political issue, but it's actually not. Because when I was a teacher, I just remember hitting that wall constantly. We had funding so that every single student could have their own electronic device. When parents didn't have internet connections, our school would literally set them up with one for free. We had all of these amazing programs that, could do differentiated instruction for where their academic gaps were. And all I asked as a teacher was, please be on this program for 10 to 15 minutes a night. And they still wouldn't do it. It's like you can't blame systemic racism for that individual choice to not do homework. And those same kids would be telling me how they were, on Fortnite for hours at a time. It's like, at what point do individuals and individual families and individual communities have to take responsibility and accountability for our daily choices? If your child is allowed to be on Fortnite for 3 hours, and I'm telling you and calling you and texting you every day saying your child is not doing their homework, there is no excuse for that. And that cannot be blamed on the amorphous white man somehow. And that is just what drives me crazy about so many social justice movements, is because in them allegedly trying to do good, they're actually handicapping a whole group of people. They're training them to blame all of their problems on somebody else. They're training them that it's somehow discriminatory to hold standards and hold the line and to have expectations and to say, no, you didn't meet this. And in extreme cases, they're calling standards themselves racist. Like I remember, I think it was the Smithsonian that said something like time orientedness was racist. Math and science was racist.
Yeah, math is racist. Yep, I'm a math teacher. Yep.
It's so extreme. It's so crazy, but it looks like the people that are in the institutions that are making the decisions seem all on board with this. And it's so crazy to me. And I just don't know what to do, because you get Black educators that actually care about Black kids. And I was told in professional development meetings that I had internalized whiteness, internalized oppression, and that I was culturally white and not Black for having the opinions that I have. And so it's hard not to think this is not some kind of conspiracy at this point, because it's so insane. And all of the data is proving that we're doing worse. For all of the criticisms about so-called zero tolerance policies, it's like everything we've done, it's worse. Teachers are getting attacked. Students don't feel safe. Everybody's scores are going down. And yet their idea is, let's not stop some of these crazy policies. Let's triple down on them and let's gaslight the heck out of everyone that speaks against it. So now that was my rant. I feel just as strongly as you do about this. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, now we have to actually put a blame on somebody, and we need to do it. And I know a lot of teachers are like, well, it's the parents. I have a hard time arguing that is 100% the parents, because the parents aren't being told the truth. So it's hard to really operate. I was like, teachers telling me that, this one teacher is telling me that my student is not operating up to par, but they've been through several other grades and we've been doing the same behavior and they've been successful. And the teachers sort of say a little something, but then at the end of the year, they got A's, they got 80s or whatever else, because their grades are so inflated. but the parents don't know to what extent the inflation is occurring. So like, I guess my kid is fine, and the reports are saying that the kid is fine. They talk, the principal is like, oh yeah, the kid will be fine, and they go to the teacher and then start kicking the teacher's tail and whooping the teacher upside the head with documentation and everything else. Yeah, the kid's going to be fine because there's abuse happening. So I can't really put the blame on parents because they're not being told the truth, and also they're not being invited into the correct atmosphere. As a local government, the school districts have so much power. um, it's time that they use that to grow the community. It's not even necessarily about growing the students. We know a lot of the students that we have, they have kids that are in younger grades. I teach high school, and a couple of years after they leave high school, they'll have a kid that's in the elementary school years. And that student that I had no longer, they're not going to be the greatest of parents because they went through a school system that led them wrong. So the school district's job will need to be to grow the parents, be like, hey, well, your kids' actions are unacceptable. And now you see the data, you see the actual report of the performance, and then how you act, we can address you too. How you're acting is unacceptable. And how you are not having your student here on time, how you're not, forcing, working with your student on X, Y, and Z, or most of it's going to be making sure if you're making sure your student is there on time and making sure that they're in dress code, if those things are handled, or if you're making sure you're submitting your documentation when your student is absent, that's going to grow the parent up and help them be more accountable and responsible, where those other responsibilities will start taking hold. Okay, I'm now engaged. I'm making sure my kid's on time. I'm making sure my kid's in dress code. The teacher's telling me I need to do this. Now I'm gonna start doing this. But if you're not doing those other ones, those small introduction ones, you're not helping the parent learn responsibility. And you're taking extra crap because the parent's complaining and you're not doing anything about it. You don't have to take the crap from anybody. But the administrators, they don't care. That's the whole thing. They just don't care. And the longer this smoke screen is up and everyone is gaslit, they can make their money and call it a day. It's less work for them to do.
Yeah, and I think I get so many questions from people that are outside of education that asks, why don't more teachers stand up and sue? I know what I think. I think it's because most people feel like they can't afford the consequences. But what are your thoughts on why more people are not doing what you're doing?
Most teachers don't know how to go about it. It's so much, it's going to be so much time. They'll rather just wash their hands of it and leave the district because they could, in essence, blacklist you. If I didn't fight back on the TINA plan, they were trying to slip stuff into my documentation and my evaluations and everything else that would have pretty much made it difficult for me to find another job. They can act like I was being difficult, that I was being some type of terrible teacher. So it would have been almost the end of my career as a teacher. I just came to the mindset, I'm a musician, clearly. I play at a church. I can do other things. And I said, enough is enough. If this is the end of my teaching career, so be it. But I'm not just going to leave like all the other teachers that have just been raising their hands up and leaving. I came into the profession to make a difference. If I can't do that, then I need to go out at least trying to make that difference that I said I was going to make. And when I'm teaching my students, like I want them to be leaders and stuff like that. How can I try to give them advice that I'm not willing to take myself? Even when there's risk involved, right is right. And if this is something I have to do, if I have to risk it all on this, I'll be fine financially without it. I can find something else to do. But before I let this chapter go, I'm not going to go without a fight. The students deserve better. Teachers in general deserve better because a lot of the teachers in our district, we're not actually struggling to keep teachers. They're actually quietly letting certain teachers out or kicking them out. So the teacher shortage is actually not even as bad as they say it is, because the teachers that really want to do what I'm trying to do, administration is doing what they did to me, and they're forcing them out. They're not giving them contracts. The following year, it's like, oh yeah, your performance was so bad, we're not going to renew your contract. But on paper, if you go to the district's files, it'll say that the teacher resigned because they don't let any teachers just quit. If you're leaving, they have to get a resignation from you. So then if you try to turn around and sue, it's like, oh, well, this teacher actually resigned, although they said you wouldn't be brought back and everything else. That's what they do. So we don't have a shortage. All the teachers that are quitting aren't actually quitting and resigning. A lot of them are told, you cannot come back. We don't want you back. And they're flagging it, and they're having the data misrepresent what's actually happening behind the scenes. So I know several teachers that are like, I wanted to come back, but they said they were not going to give me another contract. But then when I went to HR, they said I had to resign. I had to put in a resignation. There's fraud on that end too, of just what the data says. Are teachers really quitting in droves, or we're just ushering out the teachers that actually are trying to stand up for something?
100%. And I'm kind of curious, in a dream world, if you had a magic wand to wave, what specifics do you think have to happen to kind of correct the trajectory that this ship is on? What specifics need to change?
If teachers start suing en masse over the things that are happening to them, a lot of teachers that are leaving from one year to the next, that will shift. That means administrators will be on notice that they need to follow the policies. Follow the policies. That one thing would change a lot of what's happening across the board. Just administrators following the policies, not giving a bunch of excuses, not trying to take every situation and it's so complicated. This one's no. We're just gonna go bare bones. We'll deal with each situation. If we need to appeal decisions, we'll do that separately. But we need to be able to efficiently go through and make quick determinations. We need to give the teachers the professional autonomy that they're supposed to have. Administrators are spending so much of their time because they're saying, "Oh, what's the teacher's fault?" These students are being said, "It's the teacher's fault. It's the teacher's fault." So now you have the administrators being branded. This wasn't a thing when I started. Being branded as educational leaders, where they're supposed to be the professionals of the professionals that are the master teachers, and they're supposed to show the teachers all these great practices that's going to warp their classroom. When at the end of the day, a lot of the issues that teachers are having with the number one, every teacher is going to have an issue with classroom management. Actually, it wasn't the teacher's responsibility to manage the classroom in the way that we're doing it today. So that's why all teachers, or pretty much any new teacher, is going to struggle with that, is because that was administration's job. If a teacher is having issue with a student that refuses to do what they were asked, they are insubordinate, they need to go. That's what it used to be. So the teacher will spend their time teaching. Go figure. That makes sense. So now you have, oh, well, the classroom management just not there. Classroom management came about when administrators were saying they were so swamped, they needed the teachers just to manage, get by, do what you do with what you can. So you leave me alone. That was the whole point of the classroom management ideology. And then some people bottled it up, put it in a book, started coming around doing professional developments, and administration was like, "Oh, this is great. Yeah, have all the teachers do this. If one teacher could make do with me barely doing anything, let's have all the teachers make do with barely doing anything." And then it became a whole thing, ignoring state laws that we have in Texas, where teachers have a right to have students removed and all that other type of stuff. Ignoring all of that, now we have this ideology that goes around, and you have this chaos in the classrooms. And now teachers are all of a sudden inept. And then that evolved into now all the teachers just need a whole bunch of professional development because they're just not all good enough to handle the students that we have. It's one big loop, and it's causing a major impact on the educational environment, period, and on the job. And that's why a lot of teachers like, I just can't do it anymore, because they're trying to hold stuff they were never supposed to hold, trying to do stuff they were never supposed to do. That wasn't the purpose.
That's a great point. And I'm
Did I
just
answer your
curious.
question?
Oh, yeah, it was perfect. Perfect. And I'm just kind of curious, what impact have you seen this have on the students? And how are students different than when you were in school? Because I'm assuming when you were in school, this zoo environment wasn't common. So what are some of the differences you're seeing with students, basically?
I'm seeing the divide in students, high and low, just get larger. For me personally, COVID years were the best years of my life. I'm married, I have kids, so being at home with the kids was great. But I also noticed the divide with students. The COVID model actually worked. For the students that had the discipline to actually do it, they grew in leaps and bounds. They had a lot more freedom to do the things that they like to do in life, but they actually were able to maximize their education because they weren't slowed down by the other students.
Hmm.
So that divide was huge. And then you have the students that didn't engage with the online virtual learning model, and they started falling further behind because the school district was like, well, they didn't get on at all, they didn't log in, we can't fail these students. So they just started passing students along, and that's when the real just passing without even showing up to class, passing without you turning in anything, started to really come in from an administrative level with boldness, because the district did it by and large during COVID, and it didn't seem to stop after that. But when I was in school, students would, we would actually do our work. We still had drill and kill. We actually developed skills, and then of course some wise know-it-all said, oh, no, students just need to do it once and they'll be good, and they know it. They need to know and then show, and if they can know and show, then they've got it, and then we can call it mastery. Like that's what they started saying. But when I was a kid, mastery was, you just couldn't do it. You could do it to a clock, which means you could do it efficiently, quickly, and accurately. Now it's just like, oh, well, if we gave you 10 hours, could you do this one problem? That's sort of where the standard is shifted to. Instead of like, okay, I know you can do it, but how quick can you do it? Because especially with stuff like math, it builds on top of itself. So there's no foundation or endurance for students to have when they're taking larger tests. They just don't have the stamina, and all that would have been built if you had a classroom where we're already developing you for certain levels of stamina, and we don't have to teach you the test. We could just teach you basic skills, and you'll have the stamina, the endurance, the efficiency and accuracy to like knock it out. That was the biggest shift. Is like there was a big pool. I guess someone made a bunch of money just saying, yeah, we don't need all that homework. And then the administration's like, oh, this is great, let's do it. And then they roll it out. No documentation, no actual reports or evidence. It was like, yeah, man, who wants to do all this drill and kill? Yeah, they have something to hang their hat on and make a bunch of money on it. And they did, and they cashed out. And here we are with the aftermath of not having routines in classrooms where students are working on their foundational skills, going over phonics, doing the alphabet, forwards and backwards, learning how to organize. Like students don't know how to alphabetically sort. So I saw videos about a music teacher. It's like she was struggling because they couldn't, on the staff, go from A to G, and they were having a hard time figuring out what letter comes after C and stuff like that. It's not that they don't know the alphabet, but there's a difference between knowledge and skills. And in Texas, we used to have the knowledge and skills test. But when I go to a professional development, they just keep talking about knowledge. Oh, the students don't know. The students don't know. The students don't know this. The students don't know that. Y'all didn't teach this because the students didn't know it. I said, no, we definitely taught it. The issue is not knowledge at this point. Math, in particular, is a skill-based course, which means that it's more akin to a sport where you have to go through the same processes over and over and over and over again until you can do them in your sleep and do them backwards without having to thinking about it, because otherwise you become too encumbered to do these complicated problems or equations, because there are several steps and you build your own step with these skill sets. Like we understood that when I was in school. We did different calculations and computations over and over and over again. Now these students, since they're not adjusted to that, they don't have that skill set, and no matter what we do, they're not going to have the knowledge, because you can't get skill quickly. And that goes to what you were talking about, holding students back. If students don't have the skill, you can't get that by scaffolding. Oh, it's this scaffolding your warm up. They'll be fine. Just throw that in the warm up and they'll know the information. It's a skill issue. They don't have the skill because they haven't had enough time on task with the information to develop a skill about it where they can execute it efficiently. So they might need another year. It's what I always tell my students. Like, if my son wanted to be in the NBA, my son does not play basketball. It doesn't matter what interventions and any other thing I do, he is not going to be ready for the NBA next year, or the year after that, or the year after that, or the year after that. He might never be ready for the NBA because that level of skill is too high. And that's what we're doing to our kids. We're putting them into grade levels where they don't have the skill to be successful, and we're not stopping or pausing to help them develop those skills and taking the time without trying to rush them out the door to the next grade level.
100%. I think we somehow have to bring back the idea that it's okay to embrace hard work and boredom, because I just think that that is so at the heart of all of these crazy initiatives. This idea that kids need to be having so much fun and be so entertained and enjoying every second of everything. And if they're not, the teacher has failed. Yet you go around the world to teachers and students that can actually produce results, and it looks very classic and very traditional. You know, they're learning, they're memorizing, they're reading, they're writing, they're doing equations, they're doing hard work. And yeah, it's kind of boring. That's like welcome to college. You know, it's a lot of giant textbooks with tons of like reading. And somehow we're buying into this mindset that a person is a bad teacher if the kid is not having a blast. And it's just crazy. And I'm
It
okay.
it goes to what they always say: engagement, engagement, engagement. So we've warped the meaning of the word engagement to mean entertain the students. Why? Why are we? They're pushing us to entertain students. Happens to be because to be engaged and actually be a real learner, you have to have discipline. We stripped everything away that actually creates discipline, because discipline is not knowledge; it's a skill, which means you have to sit and be disciplined either with IDs, dress code, some type of rules where you have to yield to self and have self control, which is a skill, to be able to sit down and have the discipline to do academics. We don't have the discipline. So we need to throw up some other smoke screens and facades. Otherwise, the real cracks are going to show if we don't hammer the teacher. So that's the reason why the shift happened. But engagement, I saw the writing on the wall because I was confused my first couple of years. I'm like, okay, they want all these lessons to be entertaining. And then I saw the students how they were acting. I'm like, this isn't going to work. They're not really going to learn. And if it does work, they're not learning as much, because when it's entertaining, it's light on content. It's light on nutrition. Just like, candy is more sugary and it's not nutritional. So I went to the movie theater and I saw the writing on the wall. Went to the movie theater. It's like, hey, get off your phone, watch a movie. I'm like, oh crap, we're in trouble. We're in trouble, because if we're trying to be more entertaining than what they're trying to get to, if movie theaters, we're at a point now, it's like it worked for so long until there's no more rope left. And we have no more rope to pull from that well, is run dry, because the movie theaters, they spend $multi-million productions, have no value other than entertainment. And they're going to pay for it. So they're going to a movie theater where even some have $1 billion budgets. They're paying to go see it. And they'll rather be off task on their phone than watch the movie, where the movie theater is like, get off your phone, watch the movie. We're done. There's nothing else we can do. Once you see that realization, I noticed it years ago. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to go down this whole path of engagement as an entertainment debate, because you have video games trying to keep kids entertained and engaged, because they're like, well, they play for a little bit and they stop playing. They get bored of it. And this is a multi-billion-dollar industry where its strict purpose is to engage and entertain. And it's not working. What can we actually possibly have in education where, especially for me, I'm teaching math. Maybe the football coach can do it. And they're always like, look at what the football coaches are doing. They're doing great. Yeah, maybe they can do it because the kids want to play and they want to get the girls. So that's why they're engaged. It's like, yeah, well, I'm gonna be on the field. Everybody's gonna see me. It's all about me. That's why they're doing their part there. But anyway, it's not gonna work. So I had a conversation with the principal during all those different meetings, and it was like, well, I don't know if they're always engaged. I said, you see all my data? Like I can see that they logged into this assignment, they did this assignment, they have time on this assignment. That's engagement. Them worksheets used to be called engagement. It's just, instead of the teacher coming into the room, talking, and students saying nothing, giving no responses, then walking out of the room, that's zero engagement. If the teacher asks a question, that's engagement. If the teacher gives a worksheet, that's engagement. If the teacher gives them a textbook, oh my God, they're working out of the textbook. That's not engaging at all. That used to be considered engagement because they're doing something. They're tasked to do something, which means they're engaged. That's it. That's all the word meant. And I don't know when the experts that be turned it synonymous with entertainment. They are two complete, separate, distinct things. But then you have administration now pushing it as, well, if they're not having fun, it's not engaging enough. You need more engagement, more engagement. No, I have like 5 activities in my class. Like they're doing 5 different assignments, quick mini assignments that they're doing. There's plenty of engagement in my classroom. Do they have the discipline? We're working on that. And I need your help, principal. I need your help.
100%. Now, I guess I'll kind of conclude with a really controversial topic and question, but this was another one of my pet peeves. At my last district, we were told that it's racist to basically have any kind of discipline policy aimed toward defiance and disrespect on the part of the student because it's just their culture to basically be rude and disrespectful. I wish I was making it up. And I've even had professional developments where people talked about, like maybe a Black student cusses out the teacher, but they're just misunderstood. We need to try to understand them. I'm curious, what kind of effect do you think that that's going to have now that students are basically being encouraged to embrace being disrespectful, like hating authority, saying and doing what they want with no pushback? How do you think that this story is going to end?
Yeah, this is a loaded question. Um, it doesn't end well. Let's start there. It doesn't end well, and we've already been seeing it. There's the whole Black fatigue movement of just insubordinate Black people just doing the dumbest things at Texas roadhouses, Carnival cruise lines, all that type of stuff. It's just going to create more of that where you just can't be told what to do. So there's no correcting. You already don't have the self-correcting aspect. You're not going to let your peers correct you. So the only people left that can correct you would be security or actual police officers, which goes back to the whole thing of, well, we're trying to do this so there's no, school to prison pipeline. Well, now we're circling all the way back, and this is the fulfillment of that prophecy of the school to prison pipeline. We're actually solidifying it, and we're nailing the screws in and bolting in the framework for it by trying to avoid it. So your avoidance in the way that we're going about it is actually fulfilling the prophecy itself, which is ironic. Um, yeah, it's so sad. So we're just gonna have a lot more of that, where students are being belligerent to administrators because they're not learning the respect for authority that they're supposed to have. We have in the state of Texas, there is a before they graduate, students are supposed to learn how to respect peace officers and deal with peace officers. I think there should be more of that. And I know people are like, well, it looks too much like an institution inside of schools or whatever else. But our students need to learn how to talk to authority. They need to learn how to behave themselves in public spaces. And all that comes into learning how to behave in the classroom. That's number one. If it weren't the classroom, how my kids learned it was learning how to behave in church. So it's somewhere where the parent is, where they're monitoring the behavior of their child and they're working on it. If they don't get it like at a church setting or something like that, where they're with their parent, like they need to learn how to get it from somewhere. We have the kids most of the day, so it can come from the school district simply by us following our policies. We can fix a lot of this just by us following the policies that we already have on the books, hold kids accountable. That would affect kids acting a fool in grocery stores or acting a fool in wherever that my kids are 15 and 13. And my son has no desire to learn to drive because everywhere they go, all the businesses are treating teenagers as a problem. Like they can't go anywhere anymore without adult supervision because the kids have been acting so bad. So they want to go to the trampoline park, they need an adult. They want to go to the mall, you have to adult. They kick kids out of the mall at like 3 o'clock, something like that, because the kids have been going up there and acting straight fools and fighting. Six Flags, same thing. Any place that you would want to go as a kid, when you're getting into your teenage years, if you were responsible, that we could go, they can't go. So he has no desire to like start driving because there's no benefit. Where can he go? He's going to be hounded. Like they just harass him. Private businesses harass. And if private businesses are doing it, why is the school not doing it? If private business has to be like, yeah, we can't allow these teenagers in on our properties because they don't know how to behave. When is that a cue for the school to get their act together and actually do what we're supposed to be doing and teaching these foundational skills so that we can have better communities and neighborhoods? I don't know.
100% great points. Well, this has been such a great conversation and such a relief because sometimes I just feel like I'm going crazy all alone as I look around and think, why don't people see this? And when I read my textbooks to, become a counseling psychologist and they're just regurgitating so much of this insanity, it's just that I guess there has to be a grassroots movement of, like you said, people speaking out on public platforms, people bringing lawsuits, people just telling the truth, even if it's not seen as so-called politically correct, or even if you're going to be given some kind of crazy label for telling the truth, because this experiment isn't working. It's getting worse and worse. And we just desperately need people to come together and say that, you know what? Sanity needs to be restored in America, around the world, because the direction we're going just isn't good. And so I'm kind of curious, what are you thinking about your future in education? Do you think you'll ever go back to teaching, or do you think that this lawsuit kind of like burnt all the bridges? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I signed my contract for next year. I'm going back to the same district.
Wow.
They're not getting rid of me. It would have been I filed this I filed the lawsuit during the school year. Most lawyers would not allow you to file a lawsuit unless you've been terminated because it affects damages. And it's like, well, you didn't lose your job, so we're not going to get as much, so we're not taking it. So I filed on my own, and it would have been retaliation. They have no reason to get rid of me. And I'm like, well, why would I go anywhere else? I'm still fighting a battle here. I want this district to be right. I want it right for the students. So I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna stay at the same school. And we're gonna have to go through it again. And it was hell my last 2 years. It's been painful for me to go into the building. Like my heart hurts, my head hurts. Like I'm disrespected. It's horrible, but this is the cross I'm going to bear for this season. This is my purpose in life. Is this one thing? I'm going to do it. Like I'm going to do this, and hopefully something comes of it that is beneficial for the community, for the students. And if at the end of this, if it just doesn't work out in teaching, I'm good with that. I can move forward into something else. What that something else is, maybe just leaning more into music, but I found my sense of purpose in educating. So yeah, I'm still I'm still there.
That's a surprise twist. I thought for some reason that you were going to say that they kind of like surrounded your house with pitchforks and signs that are like, you're never welcome back. So that is a surprising good twist. And I hope things continue to get better for you instead of getting worse. But I think at a bare minimum, you have a certain degree of credibility because you see what's going on, you can speak to what's going on, and you actually care about the kids, which is the most important thing in all of this. So I just want to thank you again, Matt, for everything that you shared with us. Audience, thank you so much for watching. If you ever want to interview with me, you can email me at teachertherapytrish@gmail.com. Definitely share this video with everybody you know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, feed the algorithm, because I really want this story to get out everywhere. So thanks again, audience. Thanks again, Matt. Everybody have a great day. Bye for now.